leave me!
Just want to ask you some questions concerning your ownership of Wyvies Hall.
Those remains were buried about 10 years ago. About the time Adam owned the house and decided to take his summer off.
Adam!
But be careful, Adam. Falling in love can be a dangerous thing.
Oh, the dead baby!
Would you forgive me? Forgive me anything?
Ruth Rendell's A Fatal Inversion begins next Sunday, 9:05 on BBC One.
Every story you thought you'd heard.
I finally got to the point where I became violent. I attacked my ex-wife, got in a lot of trouble, a total, sleepwalk nightmare.
Every issue you thought you'd explored.
The climate was still more what people associate with the 50s, where, young women had to go around and pretend they were virgins all the time.
Well, I personally don't believe in sex before marriage.
Every change you thought you'd witnessed.
We went from living in a world which was very close to the Stone Age, and in 50 years, we've gone from that to the space age.
Every man you thought you knew us returns tonight.
And before that, 4 more semi-finalists take their turn in that daunting black chair now, facing up to Magnus Magnusson for Mastermind.
Hello and welcome to Mastermind for the second of our 1994 semi-finals. Once again, we are at Haddo House Hall in the grounds of Haddo House in Aberdeenshire, the ancestral home of the Earls of Aberdeen. One of the most distinguished members of the family was George, the 4th Earl, who was Prime Minister during the Crimean War. Another was John Campbell Gordon, the 7th Earl, who was Governor-General of the Dominion of Canada in the late 19th century. In fact, this very hall was inspired by the community centres which he and his wife Isabel, Wee Twa as they called themselves, had seen on their first tour of Canada in 1890. Today the walls are decorated with memorabilia from their days in Canada. It makes an unusual and intriguing background to the many fascinating cultural events which take place in the hall today, like, dare I say it, Mastermind itself. And so on to our 4 semi-finalists whose specialized subjects are the novelist Paul Scott, the German tank commander Heinz Guderian, the history of chemistry, and James Joyce. So could our first semi-finalist take the black chair, please? Your name, please?
Alan Murgatroyd.
Occupation?
Local government officer.
In the first round, you took the human geography of modern India from 1947. What is your chosen specialized subject for the semi-final?
The Life and Raj Quartet of Paul Scott.
Alan Murgatroyd, you have 2 minutes on the Life and Raj Quartet of Paul Scott, starting now. To whom did Scott dedicate the novel The Jewel in the Crown?
Fern and John.
No, it was Mrs. Ganapati. In the Raj Quartet, what's the name of the child born to Daphne Manners?
Parvati.
Correct. In the Raj Quartet, who commands the first Pancot rifles during the Second World War?
Colonel Layton.
Correct. In the Towers of Silence, what does Barbie Batchelor give Ronald Merrick when she meets him at Rose Cottage?
A glove. A set of apostle spoons.
No, her copy of the picture of the jewel in the crown. In the painting of the jewel in the crown, what does Barbie Batchelor say that the jewel presented to Queen Victoria symbolizes?
The support of India.
India itself, I'll accept that. What was the title of Scott's first published work in 1941?
I, Gerontius.
Correct. From the age of 14, Neil Gosh, the model for Scott's fictional Harry Kumar, attended which real public school?
Pass.
What's the name of Harry Kumar's old friend with whom he spent school holidays in England in the 1930s?
Colin Lindsay.
Is correct. For which newspaper did Harry Kumar work until the night of his arrest?
Mayapur Gazette.
Correct. For what purpose does Mabel Leighton send a cheque to the value of £100 to Sir Ahmed Akbar?
For the relief of the widows of Chilling
Correct. What is the clinical name of the infection which killed Sarah Leighton's grandfather in the Raj Quartet and very nearly killed Scott himself?
Amoebiasis.
Correct. In the division of the spoils, who owns a flat in Bombay where Captain Purvis unsuccessfully attempts suicide?
Hapgood.
Correct. In Mayapore in 1942, who proposed to Daphne Manners and was turned down?
Rowan.
No, it was Ronald Merrick. What is the word scrawled on the dressing table mirror in the room in which Ronald Merrick was murdered?
Bibico.
Correct. What do the initials MAK stand for in the Raj Quartet?
Muhammad Ali Qasim.
Correct. In the Day of the Scorpion, why does Muhammad Qasim write to his wife to remember their noble but eccentric ancestor Ahmed Ghaffar Ali Rashid?
It's a code of
Correct.
the coins.
Which of Scott's novels won the Ayr and Spottiswoode Literary Fellowship Award in 1951?
Johnny Saab.
Correct. What was the title of the unfinished, I've started, so I'll finish. What was the title of the unfinished novel on which Scott was working in the months before he died in 1978?
After the Funeral.
No, it was Mango Rain or The Careerist or Married with Two Children. And at the end of that round, Alan Murgatroyd, you have scored 13 points. You passed on one. The real public school which Neil Gosh, the model for Scott's fictional Harry Kumar, attended was Blundell's School. Alan Murgatroyd, thank you very much. And our second semi-finalist, please. Your name, please.
Christopher Argyle.
Occupation?
Author, researcher.
In the first round, you took Japan at war in the Second World War. What is your chosen specialized subject this
The
time?
life and career of Heinz Guderian.
Christopher Argyle, you have 2 minutes on the life and career of Heinz Guderian, starting... Now, where on the Vistula was Heinz Guderian born in 1888?
Culm.
Correct. Which battalion did Guderian join as an officer cadet in 1907?
10th Hanoverian Jaeger.
Correct. To which organization was Guderian appointed in February 1918?
To the General Staff.
Correct. In October 1918, to which country was Guderian sent as an operations staff officer?
Italy.
Correct. Who commanded the Iron Division of the Freikorps, which Guderian joined as second general staff officer in 1919?
Pass.
In 1929, in which country did Guderian see real tanks for the first time?
Sweden.
Correct. In January 1934, where in Germany did Guderian give Hitler his first demonstration of motorized troops?
Kommersdorf.
Correct. Who encouraged Guderian to write Achtung Panzer to publicize the panzer divisions?
Lutz.
Correct. Achtung Panzer opens with an account of a German cavalry defeat at which Belgian town on August the 12th, 1914?
It's Halen.
Correct. What command did Guderian hold during the advance into Austria in March 1938?
He commanded 16th Corps.
Correct. In September 1939, what sight provoked Hitler to exclaim, "Our dive bombers did that," to which Guderian replied, "No, our panzers"?
Guderian's division had smashed a Polish column.
Yes, the shattered Polish artillery, except that in October 1939, what honor did Guderian receive from Hitler?
Knight's Cross.
Correct. Whose accusation of disobeying orders provoked Guderian to offer his resignation as commander of 19 Corps in May 1940?
Kleist.
Correct. In July 1941, which type of Russian tank did Guderian first see at Tolochino?
T-34.
Correct. On September the 16th, 1941, where in the Ukraine did Kleist's and Guderian's troops link up to encircle the Russian forces east of Kiev?
Pass.
According to Maxey, what was the name of the prize bull presented to Guderian by farmers of Schleswig-Holstein?
Pass.
In March 1943, Guderian was recalled to take up which new appointment?
Inspector of Panzer Troops.
Correct. In May 1943, who challenged, I've started, so I'll finish. In May 1943, who challenged Guderian to a duel and asked Hitler to act as his second?
Kluger, presumably.
Is right. And at the end of that round, Christopher Argyle, you have scored 15 points. You passed on 3. The commander of the Iron Division of the Freikorps, which Guderian joined as second General Staff Officer in 1919, was von der Goltz. The place in the Ukraine where Kleist's and Guderian's troops linked up to encircle the Russian forces east of Kiev was Lochwitza. And the name of the prize bull, according to Maxey, which was presented to Guderian by the farmers of Schleswig-Holstein, was Panzer Grenadier. Christopher Argyle, thank you very much. And our third semi-finalist, please. Your name, please?
George Davidson.
Occupation?
University Senior Lecturer.
In the first round, you took the coinage of England from 1066 to 1662. What is your chosen subject for the semi-final?
The History of Chemistry, 1500 to 1870.
Dr. Davidson, you have 2 minutes on the history of chemistry between those dates starting. Now, the 16th century alchemist who applied the term alcohol to spirit of wine is known by what name?
Paracelsus.
Correct. Which chemist, who is regarded as the father of modern chemistry, was guillotined in May 1794?
Lavoisier.
Correct. Who wrote The Skeptical Chemist, which demolished the old doctrine of the 4 elements?
Boyle.
Correct. Which chemical structure did Kekulé discover after dreaming of a snake biting its own tail?
Benzene.
Correct. Who wrote A New System of Chemical Philosophy, which set out the atomic theory of matter?
Dalton.
Correct. Which metal was William Wollaston studying when he discovered palladium and rhodium?
Platinum.
Correct. Who is credited with the first detailed study of nitrous oxide gas, which he found to have anesthetic properties?
Davy.
Correct. What is the modern name for the process by which Davy first isolated potassium and sodium?
Electrolysis.
Correct. Which Flemish chemist, working in the 17th century, coined the word gas?
Van Helmont.
Correct. Which chemist was forced to flee Birmingham when a mob ransacked his home on the anniversary of the fall of the Bastille?
Priestley.
Correct. Around 1772, which Swedish chemist discovered oxygen, which he called fire air?
Scheele.
Correct. Around 1813, which Swedish chemist introduced a system of symbols based upon the first letters of the Latin names of the chemical elements?
Berzelius.
Correct. With whom did Joseph Louis Proust have a long-standing dispute over the law of fixed proportions?
Berthollet.
Correct. Around 1816, who hypothesized that all elements were composed of hydrogen, which he called first matter?
Prout.
Correct. Which element, first isolated from seawater in the mid-1820s, is named after the Greek word for stink?
Bromine.
Correct. What name is given to the branch of molecular chemistry in which Louis Pasteur first made his name before he turned to medical science?
Microbiology.
No, stereochemistry. In 1828, who obtained urea from ammonium cyanate?
Wöhler.
Correct. What important new chemical concept was propounded in 1852 by Edward Frankland?
Valency.
Correct. Which was the first aniline dye to be discovered by William Perkin in 1856?
Mauve.
Correct. In which European city was the international conference held in 1860 to address the problem of determining atomic weights?
Karlsruhe.
Karlsruhe is right. At the end of that round, Dr. George Davidson, you have scored 19 points and no passes. Thank you very much. And our fourth semi-finalist, please. Your name, please.
John Coggrave.
Occupation.
Retired lecturer.
In the first round, you took the life and works of Igor Stravinsky. What is your chosen subject for the semi-final?
The life and works of James Joyce.
John Coggrave, you have 2 minutes on the life and works of James Joyce, starting... Now, what was the title of the poem which Joyce wrote when he was 9 about the betrayal of Charles Stuart Parnell?
Et tu Healy.
Correct. For which particular talent did Joyce win a bronze medal in Dublin in May 1904?
Singing.
Correct. What is the title of the early draft of a portrait of the artist as a young man?
Stephen Hero.
Correct. What event in Joyce's own life is commemorated by June the 16th, 1904, the date on which Ulysses is set?
The first day he walked out with his wife.
Correct. Of which of his works did Joyce say that it was written for the most part in a style of scrupulous meanness?
Dubliners.
Correct. What was the title of Joyce's second collection of verse published in 1927?
Poems Penny Each.
Correct. In a letter to which dramatist did the young Joyce say, "Your battles inspired me, those that were fought and won behind your forehead"?
Ibsen.
Correct. In which European city where Joyce spent many years were his children Giorgio and Lucia born?
Trieste.
Correct. What is the name of the writer who is the central character in Joyce's one surviving play?
Richard Rowan.
Correct. Whose funeral does Bloom attend in the Hades episode of Ulysses?
Paddy Dignam.
Correct. In the Cyclops episode of Ulysses, what is the name of the citizen's mangy mongrel at Barney Kiernan's pub?
Gary Owen.
Correct. In Ulysses, what is a nightmare from which Stephen Dedalus tells Mr. Deasy he is trying to awake?
History.
Correct. Which episode in Ulysses depends more than any other on the imitation of music and sound?
The Sirens.
Correct. In Ulysses, what drink do Bloom and Stephen share at Bloom's house in Eccles Street?
Cocoa.
Correct. What is the last word in Molly Bloom's unspoken monologue at the close of Ulysses?
Yes.
Correct. In Finnegan's Wake, what are the words "the bared board bombardment screen" referred to?
Television.
Correct. What was a word which Joyce said was the weakest word in English, which is scarcely sounded between the teeth, a breath, a nothing, which he used to end Finnegan's Wake?
The.
Correct. What are the initials which are frequently applied to the father figure and innkeeper in Finnegan's Wake?
HCE.
Correct. What term did Joyce use to describe in his writings a sudden spiritual manifestation?
Epiphany.
Correct. In Finnegan's Wake, how does Tim Finnegan die?
He falls from a hod, breaks his neck.
He is correct. And at the end of that round, John Coggrave, you have scored 20 points and no passes. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the first round, the specialized subjects round. Let us look at the scores. And in fourth place on 13 points is Alan Murgatroyd. In third place on 15 points is Christopher Argyle. In second place on 19 points is George Davidson. But in the lead by 1 point at this halfway stage with 20 points is John Coggrave. And on now to the second round, the general knowledge round. And may I have Alan Murgatroyd again, please? He is a local government officer. He's head of cashiers at Kirklees Metropolitan Council. Originally comes from Haworth, now lives in Barkersland in West Yorkshire. Scored 13 points on the Life and Raj Quartet of Paul Scott. Your general knowledge questions are starting now. What name, derived ultimately from a Latin word meaning shade, is given to a wide-brimmed hat worn in Spain, Mexico, and other countries?
Fedora.
No, sombrero. Which 19th century French novelist wrote Les Miserables?
Victor Hugo.
Correct. In geography, what is a cataract?
A waterfall.
Series of waterfalls, I'll accept that. What nickname, derived from Old English, meaning lacking counsel, is given to the Anglo-Saxon king Ethelred II?
Unreading.
Correct. In 1976, which major American aerospace corporation was found to have paid out millions of dollars in bribes to help sell its aircraft abroad?
McDonnell Douglas.
No, Lockheed. In Beatrix Potter's Tale of Mr. Todd, what kind of animal is the title character?
Frog.
He's a fox. Mussorgsky's Night on the Bear Mountain is best known in a version freely revised and orchestrated by which other Russian composer?
Shostakovich.
No, Rimsky-Korsakov. Which sea is bounded by the Norwegian Sea to the north and the Straits of Dover to the south?
North Sea.
Correct. What name, literally meaning colored body, is given to the thread-like structures in the nuclei of living cells which carry the genes?
Pass.
In Christian art, which bird is often used to represent the Holy Spirit?
The dove.
Correct. What is the name of the yellow spice made from the rhizome of the plant Curcuma longa and used as an ingredient of curry powder?
Cumin.
It was turmeric. What is the capital of the Sultanate of Oman?
Muscat.
Correct. In Greek mythology, which Titan was published by Zeus for stealing fire from heaven for the benefit of the human race?
Prometheus.
Correct. Who was the Austrian-born American director of the films High Noon and From Here to Eternity?
Mayor.
No, Fred Zimmerman. In the 19th century, which Lancashire city was nicknamed Cottonopolis?
Manchester.
Correct. In the northern hemisphere, what name is given to the full moon nearest to the autumnal equinox?
Sickle moon.
The harvest moon. There are two racecourses in the Bois de Boulogne near Paris. One is Auteuil. Which is the other? And you may answer.
Longchamp.
Is right. At the end of that round, Alan Murgatroyd, your score has gone up to 22 points. You pass on just one question about the name literally meaning colored body, which is given to the thread-like structures and nuclei of living cells which carry the genes. The answer is chromosomes. Alan Murgatroyd, thank you very much. And now Christopher Argyle again, please. He is an author and researcher and proofreader, mainly for non-fiction military works and biographies. Originally comes from Derby, now living in Birstall in Leicestershire. Scored 15 points on the life and career of Heinz Guderian, to be lying in third place at the halfway stage. Your general knowledge questions are starting. Now, the broad boulevard Unter der Linden is in which European capital city?
Berlin.
Correct. What form of transport is a dirigible?
A powered balloon.
Correct. In Dickens's Martin Chuzzlewit, who is a scheming hypocrite whose daughters are named Charity and Mercy?
Uriah Heep.
No, Mr. Pecksniff. Who is the BBC's main television commentator in the Westminster Abbey at the Queen's coronation and at the state funeral of Sir Winston Churchill?
Richard Dimbleman.
Correct. The Hooper Swan and Buick Swan are regular winter visitors, but which is the only species of swan which is resident in Britain?
Mute swan.
Correct. In printing, what name is given to the dagger symbol which is used as a mark of reference?
Pass.
By which system, instituted in March 1941, did the United States provide war materials and other supplies to aid countries fighting against Axis powers?
Lend-Lease.
Correct. Which British airline has a designator code BD?
Pass.
Which future British king married a Roman Catholic widow called Maria Fitzherbert?
George IV.
Correct. Which 20th century English composer wrote the operas The Knot Garden and The Icebreak?
Pass.
Which legendary Greek hero destroyed or drove away the voracious Stymphalian birds?
Hercules.
Heracles is right. Which religious leader wrote Veritatis Splendor, or The Splendor of Truth, which was published last year?
The Pope.
Correct. The battles of Gravelotte and Sedan were both fought in 1870, during which war?
Franco-Prussian.
Correct. In his poem Alexander's Feast, which English poet wrote None but the brave deserves the fair?
Milton.
No, Dryden. The village of Karnak, celebrated for its prehistoric megaliths, is in which region of northwest France?
Brittany.
Correct. Hansen's disease, which affects the skin and nerves and was once much feared, is commonly known by what other name?
Pass.
Which English city, the birthplace of Samuel Johnson, has a cathedral with 3 spires?
Lichfield.
Correct. Which French term describes an agent who is employed to induce or incite a suspected person to commit an incriminating act?
Agent provocateur.
Agent provocateur is right. At the end of that round, Christopher Argyle, your score has gone up to 27 points. Past on 4, in printing, the name given to the dagger symbol, which is used as a mark of reference, is the obelisk or obelisk. The British airline with the designator code BD is British Midland. The 20th century English composer who wrote the operas The Knot Garden and The Icebreaker is Sir Michael Tippett. And Hansen's disease is more commonly known as leprosy. Christopher Argyle, thank you very much. And now Dr. George Davison again, please. He is a university senior lecturer in chemistry at the University of Nottingham. Originally comes from Newcastle upon Tyne, now living in Bingham, near Nottingham. Scored 19 points on the history of chemistry, to be lying in second place at the halfway stage. 27 is the target to beat. Your general knowledge questions are starting. Now, which goddess did the Romans identify with Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom?
Pass.
What Italian name meaning little book is given to the text of an opera?
Libretto.
Correct. In the study of sleep, what do the letters REM stand for?
Random eye movement.
No, it's rapid eye movement. When Jesse Boot, the founder of the chain of chemist stores, was made a peer in 1929, what title did he take?
Lord Trent.
Correct. What is the title of the English folk song which includes the line, "Oh, 'tis my delight on a shiny night in the season of the year"?
Lincolnshire Poacher.
Correct. What name is given to the day observed on various dates in the USA and other countries, which is set aside for the planting of trees?
Pass.
In the 1380s, Lady Mary de Bohun married which future king of England?
Richard II.
No, Henry IV. What name is given to the frothy white mass found on plants in the spring which surrounds and protects the larva of the froghopper insect?
Cuckoo's Bit.
Correct. Who wrote the nonsense song, The Akond of Swat?
Lear.
Correct. Of which Baltic republic, formerly part of the Soviet Union, is Tallinn the capital?
Estonia.
Correct. Who was the fellow martyr of St. Crispin, on whose feast day, October the 25th, the Battle of Agincourt was fought?
Crispian.
Correct. In 1844, who officially inaugurated America's first public electric telegraph line between Washington and Baltimore when he tapped out the message, "What hath God wrought"?
Morse.
Correct. Which organ of the human body produces bile?
The spleen.
No, the liver. Who wrote the short story The Loneliness of the Long-Distance Runner, published in 1959?
Solitaire.
Correct. Last November, Rudolph Giuliani was elected to succeed David Dinkins as mayor of which American city?
New York.
Correct. In coup d'etat in 1979 and 81, in which African country did Flight Lieutenant Jerry Rawlings seize control?
Nigeria.
No, Ghana. In 1571, which English monarch founded Jesus College, Oxford, on the petition of Hugh Price?
Queen Elizabeth.
Correct. Woomera, established in the 1940s as a test range for missiles and rockets, is in which Commonwealth country?
Australia.
Correct. The Grand Order of Water Rats is a philanthropic society maintained by members of which profession?
Actors.
Yes, show business. The hallmark, I've just started, it's all finished. The hallmark on British silverware usually consists of the maker's mark, the town mark, the standard mark, and what else?
A letter.
The date letter is right. At the end of that round, George Davison, your score has gone up to 33 points. Two passes. The goddess which the Romans identified with Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom, was Minerva, and the name given to the day which is set aside for the planting of trees in the USA and other countries is Arbor Day. George Davison, thank you very much. And finally, John Coggrave again, please. He is a retired lecturer in English at Sunderland Polytechnic, as was now Sunderland University. Originally from Goole in Yorkshire, now living in Sunderland, scored 20 points on the life and works of James Joyce to be in the lead at the halfway point. The target you have to beat now is 33, and your general knowledge questions are starting. Now, which battle did the first Duke of Wellington reputedly describe as the nearest run thing you ever saw in your life?
Waterloo.
Correct. A string quartet usually comprises 2 violins, 1 viola, and which other instrument?
Cello.
Correct. The 18th century English philanthropist John Howard is particularly remembered for his efforts to reform which type of institution?
Prisons.
Correct. In terms of capacity, which Northumbrian reservoir is the largest in Britain?
The Kielder.
Correct. In a 14th century romance, which nephew of King Arthur beheads the Green Knight but must meet him a year later to receive a return blow?
Gawain.
Correct. The Pelagian Islands in the Mediterranean belong to which European country?
Will you repeat that, please?
Stop the watch. The Pelagian Islands in the Mediterranean belong to which European country? Start the watch.
Greece.
I know it's Italy. According to St. Matthew's Gospel, which monies were used to purchase the potter's field for the burial of strangers, which became known as the Field of Blood?
30 pieces of silver.
Correct. What kind of creatures are bass, brill, and hake?
Fish.
Correct. In 1973, which American Secretary of State was joint recipient with Lee Doc-2 of Vietnam of the Nobel Peace Prize?
Kissinger.
Correct. In Paradise Regained, which city did Milton describe as the Eye of Greece?
Athens.
Correct. Which American president was shot in July 1881 and died 80 days later?
McKinley.
No, Garfield. Which churchman compiled Relics of English Poetry, a collection of traditional verse first published in 1765?
Percy.
Correct. The Humboldt Current is a cold ocean current which flows along the western coast of which continent?
Europe.
No, South America. In ancient Greece, chryselephantine statues were made of or overlaid with ivory and which metal?
Pass.
In 1988, who was appointed Secretary to the Cabinet and Head of the Home Civil Service?
Pass.
What nickname is commonly given to Mozart's Last Symphony, number 41, in C major?
Jupiter.
Correct. Dr. Jonas Salk and Albert Sabin, working independently, each developed a vaccine against which serious viral illness?
Poliomyelitis.
Correct. In an English harlequinade, who is the daughter or ward of Pantaloon who is in love with Harlequin?
Columbine.
Columbine is right. At the end of that round, John Coggrave, you two have scored 33 points. You passed on 2 in ancient Greece chryselephantine statues were made of ivory and gold, and the gentleman who was appointed Secretary to the Cabinet and Head of the Home Civil Service in 1988 was Robin Butler. John Coggrave, thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the second round, the general knowledge round, and to another cliff-hanging ending to a semi-final. Let us look at the scores. And in 4th place on 22 points is Alan Murgatroyd. In 3rd place on 27 points is Christopher Argyle, but there is a tie at the top on 33 points between George Davison and John Coggrave. Now, according to the rules of Mastermind, if there is a tie, then the number of passes shall be taken into consideration, and the contender with the fewer or fewest passes shall be adjudged the winner. And I can now tell you that George Davison had 2 passes, and John Coggrave had 2 passes. So, for the second semi-final in succession, we have a position where we go to a sudden death playoff when the number of passes is equal, and so is the figure itself. And in the sudden death playoff, each of the 2 contenders will receive 5 questions, the same 5 questions, which they can answer in their own time, but if there's a tie on the number of correct answers, then the time will be taken into account, and passes are irrelevant in this round. So first of all, please, may I ask John Coggrave to leave the hall. So now may I invite George Davison to return to the black chair, please. For the sudden death playoff, you now have 5 general knowledge questions to answer, starting now. What kind of a creature is a fulmar petrel?
Bird.
Correct. In 1898, at the Battle of Omdurman, which British general commanded the victorious Anglo-Egyptian army?
Kitchener.
Correct. To which group of islands does Tresco belong?
Scilly.
Correct. The Roman poet Quintus Horatius Flaccus, whose works include satires, epos, and odes, is usually known by what name?
Horace.
Correct. The Popish plot of 1678 was a fictitious conspiracy. Who, with Israel Tong, was its main inventor?
Titus Oates.
Correct. And at the end of that round, George Davison, you have scored the full 5 points. Thank you very much. And now can we summon John Coggrave back to the chair, please? John Coggrave, you now have the same 5 questions for the sudden death playoff, starting now. The Popish plot of 1678 was a fictitious conspiracy. Who, with Israel Tong, was its main inventor?
Titus Oates.
Correct. The Roman poet Quintus Horatius Flaccus, whose works include satires, epos, and odes, is usually known by what name?
Horace.
Correct. To which group of islands does Tresco belong?
Windward.
No, Scilly. In 1898, at the Battle of Omdurman, which British general commanded the victorious Anglo-Egyptian army?
Kitchener.
Correct. What kind of creature is a fulmar petrel?
Bird.
Is correct. And at the end of that round, John Coggrave, you have scored 4 points. And I can tell you that Dr. George Davison scored 5 points. Thank you very much. And so, with that sudden death playoff, George Davison, the senior lecturer in chemistry at the University of Nottingham, becomes our second finalist. Our congratulations to him, our thanks to all the other semi-finalists, and particularly commiserations to John Coggrave, pipped at the very post, as they say. Well, that's all for this week. It now gives me great pleasure to thank the Marchioness of Aberdeen and the National Trust for Scotland for their kindness and their hospitality to us while we've been here at Haddo. Next time we shall be at Oakham Castle in Rutland. So until then, from Mastermind at Haddo, it's goodbye.
And that semi-final next week will be at the earlier time of 10:05.
Mankind, the hunting ape. The urge for survival ever strong. The warrior's instinct forever present. The hunt for food everlasting. One species has come to dominate the entire natural world. What's the secret of its unprecedented success? Desmond Morris's compelling natural history of the human species, The Human Animal. Wednesday, 9:30 on BBC One.
It's TV Nation with Michael Moore.
As long as I'm on BBC Two, I'm going to work to bring back darts.
Oh, no, he doesn't. Instead, Michael goes to Washington to see how much democracy he can buy for $5,000.
How about if we gave an embassy hat? How about this? A Lady Remington.
Does a bribe work in Washington?
And now our bill is before Congress. See, you're getting your money's worth.
Michael Moore's TV Nation, Friday, 9:30, BBC Two.
Patrick Moore reports on the recent collision on Jupiter of the comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 in the sky at night in 50 minutes. Now, on BBC One, Everyman begins a new series with the dilemma facing the Bishop of the Arctic, who is opposed to Church of England support for the international boycott of fur trading. He believes it threatens the beliefs and way of life of his parishioners, the Inuits. Parts of the film show details of seal hunting, which some viewers may find disturbing.